The cold wind howled across the Montana territory as Violet Beckman clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, tears freezing against her cheeks as she watched the last of her family's possessions burn before her eyes. The year was 1878, and the town council of Silver Creek had just made their verdict clear: she was no longer welcome on the land her family had called home for generations. "You have until sundown to be gone from Silver Creek." Mayor Harrington's voice still rang in her ears, his finger pointing accusingly in her direction while the rest of the council nodded in solemn agreement. "A woman with your history has no place among decent folk." Violet's crime had been refusing the advances of the mayor's son, Gregory Harrington, whose wounded pride had turned to vicious lies about her character that spread through town like wildfire. When her parents died of influenza the previous winter, leaving her the small homestead, Gregory had seen his opportunity to force her hand through marriage. Her rejection had sealed her fate. The flames consumed the last of her family's cabin as Violet turned away, leading her old mare loaded with the few belongings she'd managed to salvage. At 23, she was alone in the world with nowhere to go and winter approaching fast. 3 days of hard riding had left her exhausted, hungry, and desperate. The cold snap had come early this year, and the thin blanket she'd wrapped around herself did little to keep out the biting wind. Her mare trudged forward, as loyal as ever, but clearly struggling against the elements. "Just a little further, Daisy," Violet whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse and cold. "We'll find shelter soon." As if in answer to her prayers, the silhouette of buildings appeared on the horizon just as the sun began its descent. Not a town proper, but a ranch sprawling and well-maintained from what she could see at this distance. Smoke curled from a chimney, promising warmth within. Violet hesitated. She had no money to offer for lodging, and after her experience in Silver Creek, she was wary of seeking help from strangers. But the alternative was freezing to death in the open prairie, and despite everything, she wasn't ready to die. With trembling hands, she guided Daisy toward the ranch, praying that whoever lived there would at least allow her to sleep in their barn for the night. As she approached, a tall figure emerged from the main house, rifle in hand. Violet's heart sank. Of course, they would be suspicious of a stranger approaching at dusk. She raised her hand slowly to show she meant no harm. "State your business," the man called out, his voice deep and cautious rather than threatening. "Please, sir," Violet called back, her voice catching. "I'm just looking for shelter for the night. I can sleep in your barn. I won't be any trouble." The man lowered his rifle slightly and stepped forward, revealing himself in the fading light. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair peeking out from beneath his hat. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but his eyes were kind despite their wariness. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old. "Where are you coming from?" he asked, his eyes taking in her disheveled appearance and the meager belongings strapped to her horse. "Silver Creek," she answered honestly. I was forced to leave." Something in his expression changed, a flash of recognition perhaps, though Violet couldn't be sure in the dim light. "Name's Zachary Quinn," he said after a moment's consideration. "This is the Double Q Ranch." He gestured to the buildings behind him. "And you are?" "Violet Beckman," she replied, relief washing over her that he hadn't immediately sent her away. Zachary Quinn studied her for a moment longer before making his decision. "Miss Beckman, there's a storm brewing tonight. You're welcome to stay in the house. I've got a spare room that's proper for a lady." "I couldn't possibly," Violet began, surprised by the generous offer. "I insist," Zachary interrupted. No decent man would send a woman alone into a Montana night with snow coming. He nodded toward her mare. "Let's get your horse settled first. She looks about done in." Violet dismounted stiffly, her legs nearly buckling beneath her from exhaustion and cold. Zachary pretended not to notice as he took Daisy's reins and led both horse and rider toward the barn. The barn was large and warm, filled with the comforting smells of hay and horses. Half a dozen fine horses occupied the stalls, all looking up curiously as they entered. "You've got a beautiful place here," Violet commented as Zachary began unsaddling Daisy with practiced ease. "Been in the family for 2 generations," he replied, his hands moving efficiently. "My father built it up from nothing, and I've been expanding since he passed 5 years back." Violet helped as best she could, though her fingers were stiff with cold. "Do you run it alone?" "Got 3 hands that help with the cattle and horses," Zachary explained. "They've got cabins down by the south pasture. Good men." He finished with Daisy and turned to Violet. "Why don't you get your things and I'll show you to the house?" The main house was larger than Violet had expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Inside, a fire blazed in the stone hearth, casting warm light through the spacious main room. "Kitchen's through there," Zachary pointed. "Bedrooms down that hall. You can take the first one on the right. There's a washroom at the end of the hall with a pump inside." "Mr. Quinn, I don't know how to thank you for this kindness," Violet said, overwhelmed by the generosity of this stranger. "Zach," he corrected gently. "And no thanks needed. Just doing what's right." After showing her to a cozy bedroom with a real feather bed, a luxury Violet hadn't experienced in years, Zach excused himself to prepare some food while she freshened up. The washroom was simple but well-appointed, with a copper basin and a hand pump that, miraculously, delivered warm water. Violet almost wept at the simple pleasure of washing away days of travel from her face and hands. When she emerged, the smell of cooking food nearly made her dizzy with hunger. In the kitchen, Zach stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. "Hope you like stew," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "It's what I had going already. Not much of a cook, I'm afraid, but it's hot and filling." "It smells wonderful," Violet assured him, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "Have a seat." He nodded toward a solid wooden table. "Tell me what brings a young woman to be traveling alone in these parts, if you don't mind my asking." As they ate the hearty stew, which was indeed delicious despite Zach's modest disclaimer, Violet found herself telling him everything. About her parents, about Gregory Harrington's unwanted advances, about the false accusations, and the council's decision to banish her. "They claimed I was improper with multiple men in town," she said, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "It wasn't true, not a word of it. But Gregory's father is the mayor, and they own half the businesses in Silver Creek. Nobody was going to stand against them. Certainly not for me." Zach's expression darkened. "I've heard rumors about the Harringtons. Not good people." He refilled her coffee cup. "Where were you headed when you found my place?" "Nowhere in particular," Violet admitted. "I just knew I had to get far from Silver Creek. I have a cousin in Oregon, but that's a journey I'm not prepared for, especially with winter coming." Zach considered this information, his blue eyes thoughtful. "You're welcome to stay here until you figure things out," he said finally. "Winter's no time to be on the road, especially not alone." "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition. Place this size, I'd barely notice another person. And truth be told, it gets mighty quiet out here sometimes." He offered a small smile. "Besides, Daisy looks like she could use the rest as much as you could." "I can work," Violet insisted. "I'm good with horses, and I can cook better than—" She stopped, realizing too late how her words might sound. But Zach just laughed, a warm, rich sound. "Better than me? That wouldn't take much doing. If you're half as good as you claim, having decent meals might be worth your stay alone." And so began Violet's temporary residence at the Double Q Ranch. She expected to stay a week, perhaps 2, just long enough to rest and plan her next move. But as days turned into weeks, she found herself settling into a comfortable routine. True to her word, She took over the cooking, preparing hearty meals that earned appreciative noises from Zach and his ranch hands Elijah, Thomas, and Miguel when they came in from their long days of work. She helped with the mending, kept the house tidy, and even assisted with the horses when extra hands were needed. November turned to December, and the Montana winter settled in earnest across the land. Snow piled high around the buildings, and the world beyond the ranch seemed to disappear entirely during the worst storms. One evening, as a blizzard raged outside, Violet and Zach sat before the fire. She was darning a sock while he cleaned his revolver, a comfortable silence between them. "Why haven't you married?" Violet asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could think better of it. "I mean, I'm sorry. That's terribly forward of me." Zach looked up, surprised but not offended. "No need to apologize. It's a fair question." He set his gun aside, considering. "Almost did once." Emily was her name, daughter of a rancher from the next county. "What happened?" Violet asked softly. "Diphtheria," he answered, his voice matter-of-fact but with an undercurrent of old pain. "Took her and her whole family within a week. That was 4 years ago now." "I'm so sorry." Zach shrugged, though his eyes remained sad. "Life out here is hard. You learn to keep going." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? Surely you had suitors before that Harrington fellow caused trouble." "A few," Violet admitted, "but no one special. My parents needed me after my father's back was injured in a fall. I couldn't leave them." "You're a loyal daughter," Zach observed. "That's a quality worth more than gold out here." As Christmas approached, the atmosphere at the ranch shifted. Zach's ranch hands rode into the nearest town, Willowbrook, to spend the holiday with family and friends, leaving Zach and Violet alone at the double queue. On Christmas Eve, Violet surprised Zach with a proper feast: roast venison, potatoes, fresh bread, and even a pie made from preserves she'd found in the cellar. She'd decorated the main room with pine boughs and berries, creating a festive atmosphere despite their isolation. "This is something special," Zach said, taking in the transformed room and the table laden with food. "Haven't had a Christmas like this since my mother was alive." "Everyone deserves a proper Christmas," Violet replied, pleased by his reaction. "Even stubborn ranchers." They ate by candlelight, sharing stories of Christmases past and dreams for the future. After dinner, Zach disappeared briefly and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said, suddenly awkward as he handed it to her. "But I wanted you to have something." Violet unwrapped the paper to reveal a delicate silver hair comb inlaid with small pieces of turquoise. "Zach, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her finger over the smooth stones. "Belonged to my mother," he explained. "Thought it might look nice with your hair." "I can't accept this, it's a family heirloom," Violet protested, though she couldn't take her eyes off the lovely piece. "You can and you will," Zach insisted gently. "It's been sitting in a drawer for years. My mother would have wanted it worn by—" He hesitated. "By someone who appreciates it." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. Truly." She'd made him a gift, as well a new scarf knitted from wool she'd found in a trunk in her room, dark blue to match his eyes. When she presented it to him, his smile was so genuine it made her heart skip. As the winter deepened, so too did their connection. What had begun as a temporary arrangement of convenience evolved into something neither had expected. They fell into easy patterns, working side by side during the day and sitting before the fire each evening, talking or reading or simply enjoying each other's company. By February, Violet knew she had fallen in love with Zachary Quinn, though she dared not speak of it. Her position was still precarious, a homeless woman, dependent on his charity. Despite his kindness, despite the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking, she couldn't presume his feelings. The opportunity to learn the truth came unexpectedly. A rare February thaw allowed Zach and his men to ride into Willowbrook for supplies, and Violet accompanied them, eager for a change of scenery after months of isolation at the ranch. Willowbrook was smaller than Silver Creek but prosperous, with a main street boasting several businesses including a general store, a saloon, and a small hotel. Violet helped Zach gather the supplies they needed while the ranch hands saw to their own business. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, a well-dressed man approached, his expression brightening when he spotted Zach. "Quinn. Didn't expect to see you in town until spring thaw proper." The man extended his hand, which Zach shook warmly. "Judge Porter. Good to see you." Taking advantage of the mild spell to restock, Zach turned to include Violet. "Miss Beckman, this is Judge William Porter." "Judge, this is Miss Violet Beckman." The judge tipped his hat politely. "A pleasure, Miss Beckman. Don't believe I've had the honor before. New to these parts." Before Violet could answer, a woman's voice cut through the conversation. "Zachary Quinn, as I live and breathe." A striking blonde woman approached, her expensive fur-trimmed coat and perfectly arranged curls marking her as someone of means. She smiled broadly at Zach while giving Violet a quick, assessing glance. "Diane," Zach nodded, his expression neutral. "How are you?" "Wonderful. Now that I've seen you," she replied with practiced charm. "Father and I were just saying at breakfast how long it's been since you visited the Crossing Bee." Judge Porter chuckled. "Miss Diane Bradford has been asking after you regularly, Quinn. Her father's still hoping to combine those ranches of yours one day." Diane Bradford's smile faltered slightly at the judge's frankness, but she recovered quickly. "Father's always thinking of business. I, however, am more interested in the social benefits of such an arrangement." Her gaze slid to Violet again. "And who might this be?" "Miss Violet Beckman," Zach replied, something protective entering his tone. "She's been staying at the Double Q this winter." Understanding dawned in Diane's eyes, followed by a flash of calculation.
"How
charitable of you, Zachary. Although I'm sure the town might raise an eyebrow at such an arrangement." Two unmarried people alone at a remote ranch? People do talk. The implication was clear, and Violet felt her face flush with humiliation. It was Silver Creek all over again, her reputation questioned, her character maligned. "Miss Bradford." Zach's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that silenced everyone. "Miss Beckman is a lady of impeccable character who has been through hardships you couldn't begin to understand. I won't have her spoken about disrespectfully, not even by implication." Diane's smile turned brittle. "I meant no offense, of course. Only thinking of Miss Beckman's reputation." "Miss Beckman's reputation is not your concern," Zach replied firmly. "Now if you'll excuse us, we have a long ride back to the ranch." He helped Violet up to the wagon seat with deliberate courtesy before climbing up beside her. With a tip of his hat to Judge Porter, he snapped the reins and the wagon rolled away, leaving Diane Bradford staring after them. They rode in silence for several minutes, Violet's thoughts in turmoil. Finally she spoke. "She's very beautiful." Zach glanced at her.
"Who?"
"Diane."
"Yes."
"And clearly interested in you." He snorted. "Diane Bradford is interested in the Double Q and the 15,000 acres that go with it. Her father's been trying to buy me out for years." "But she seemed genuinely Violet," Zach interrupted, pulling the wagon to a halt. He turned to face her fully. "Diane Bradford could be the last woman on Earth, and I wouldn't be interested. She's cold as ice under all those fancy trimmings." "Oh," Violet said softly, not knowing how else to respond. Zach hesitated, then continued, his voice low and sincere. "Besides, my interests lie elsewhere these days." Violet's heart quickened. "Elsewhere?" "With a woman who can cook a venison stew that makes a man think of heaven. Who can gentle the meanest stallion in the corral with nothing but soft words. Who makes a house feel like a home for the first time in years." His blue eyes held hers. "A woman who came to me with nothing but has given me everything that matters." "Zach," Violet whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I know it hasn't been long, he continued. And maybe I'm a fool for speaking so soon. But these months with you, I haven't been so happy since before I can remember. He took her gloved hand in his. I don't want you to leave when spring comes, Violet. Not ever if you'll stay. Tears sprang to Violet's eyes, but they were tears of joy. I don't want to leave either. Then don't, he said simply.
Stay.
Be my wife. Share the double Q with me. It's a good life, not always an easy one, but we'd face it together. Are you sure? Violet asked, needing to be certain. Your reputation, hang my reputation, Zach declared. I know who you are, Violet Beckman. I know your heart. That's all that matters to me. In answer, Violet leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that spoke more clearly than words ever could. They were married 2 weeks later in Judge Porter's parlor in Willowbrook, with the ranch hands as witnesses. When they returned to the double Q, Zach surprised Violet by presenting her with a deed. What's this? She asked, examining the formal document. Half the ranch, Zach explained. Put in your name, legal and proper. What's mine is yours now, Violet Quinn. Violet stared at him in disbelief. Zach, you can't give me half your ranch. It's your family legacy. And now it's our family legacy, he countered. Those people in Silver Creek took everything from you. I wanted to make sure no one could ever do that again. Violet's eyes filled with tears. No one has ever. She couldn't finish. Zach took her in his arms. Get used to it, Mrs. Quinn. You're home now, and this land is as much yours as it is mine. Spring brought new life to the double Q. The cattle that had wintered in the sheltered southern pastures were driven to higher grazing lands. Foals were born to the maras in the breeding program Zach had started. And in the garden behind the main house, Violet planted vegetables and flowers, creating a little paradise all her own. Word of their marriage spread throughout the territory, eventually reaching Silver Creek. One day in early summer, a rider approached the ranch, his manner cautious. Violet was hanging laundry when Zach called her to the front porch. Man here says he's from Silver Creek, he explained quietly. Says he knows you. Violet approached warily, recognizing the visitor as Peter Collins, the Silver Creek general store owner. He removed his hat as she appeared. Mrs. Quinn. He addressed her respectfully, using her married name. I've come with news from Silver Creek. I thought you should hear. What news? Violet asked, feeling Zach's supportive presence beside her. Mayor Harrington and his son have been arrested, Collins announced. Turns out they've been embezzling town funds for years. When the county officials investigated, they found evidence of all sorts of wrongdoings. Violet absorbed this news with surprise. I see. There's more, Collins continued awkwardly. Several women have come forward with stories about Gregory Harrington similar to yours. The town council, he cleared his throat. The new town council wants to formally apologize for the injustice done to you. They've voted to offer restitution for your family's property. Zach's hand found Violet's, squeezing gently. That's decent of them, he commented, his tone neutral. Collins nodded. It was wrong what happened. Many of us knew it at the time, but were too cowardly to speak against the Harringtons. He looked directly at Violet. I'm sorry for my part in that, Mrs. Quinn. Violet considered her response carefully. The pain of those days hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had faded in the warmth of her new life. Thank the council for their message, Mr. Collins. As for restitution. She looked up at Zach, drawing strength from his steady gaze. My home is here now. The double Q is where I belong. After Collins departed, Zach pulled Violet into his arms. You could have taken their offer. That land was your family's for generations. And now this land is my family's, she replied, resting her head against his chest. They banished me from their town, but in doing so, they sent me straight to you. I wouldn't change that, not for all the restitution in the world. Zach kissed her softly. When you rode up that first evening, half frozen and desperate, I never imagined you'd be the answer to a prayer I hadn't even known I was making. And I never imagined that losing everything would lead me to finding everything that truly matters, Violet replied. Over the years that followed, the Double Q prospered under their joint stewardship. Zach's breeding program produced horses sought after throughout the territory, while Violet's careful management of the household and finances allowed them to expand their holdings. They built a larger home to accommodate their growing family, first a son they named James after Zach's father, then twin daughters, Emily and Rose. On their 10th anniversary, they stood together on the ridge overlooking their ranch, the buildings below glowing golden in the setting sun. The land stretched away in all directions, lush and beautiful in the summer evening. Remember what I told you that day I put half the ranch in your name? Zach asked, his arm around her waist. That it was our family legacy, Violet replied, smiling at the memory. Look at it now, he said with pride. The finest ranch in the territory, and 4 beautiful children to inherit it someday. Violet leaned her head against his shoulder. From nothing to everything, she mused. Sometimes I still can't believe how fortunate I am. It wasn't fortune, Zach corrected gently. It was love. Love built this place. Love keeps it strong. He turned her to face him. And loving you, Violet Quinn, has been the greatest privilege of my life. As the sun sank below the horizon, they made their way back to the house where their children waited, their laughter echoing across the land that had become a true home, a sanctuary built on second chances and the enduring promise of love. In the years that followed, the story of Violet Beckman and Zachary Quinn became something of a legend in the territory. People spoke of the woman banished from her home, who found her destiny on a stranger's ranch, and of the cowboy whose act of kindness in sheltering a desperate woman led to a love that transformed them both. The Double Q Ranch stood as testament to what could be built when 2 people faced the world together, bound by love and a shared vision of home. And for all who knew them, Zach and Violet Quinn remained living proof that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding something far more precious.